Right. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Freese, the mayor of Tonganoxie, calling to order the August 2nd, 2021 regular meeting. Mr. Porter, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Hempel.
Here.
Mr. Dale.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Here.
Mr. Donnelly.
Here.
Ms. McCutcheon.
Here.
All present, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Item 2 is the approval of minutes. Any discussion on the minutes from last meeting? Any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. McCutcheon. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 3 on the consent agenda is review of bill payments. Are there any questions or discussion about the bill payments this week? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hempel. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Moving on to number 5, Mr. Brakovich, we are doing A and B kind of at the same time. Do I have that correctly?
Yes, Mayor, that's true. Real quick, though, before we go to item 5, I know we did have someone that signed up to speak this evening, but in looking, I don't believe they're here, but Dan, do you remember the gentleman's name?
The person who signed up was James Ayers, who lives on Wilshire Drive here in Tonganoxie. He did request to address the council and told me that his topic of discussion were concerns with the activity of cars speeding down his street in front of his residence. And so I gave him the information about the meeting, but he may not have been able to attend tonight.
Can someone follow up with him tomorrow or the next day or something? Oh, Mr. Lawson? I'm sorry, Chief Lawson, thank you. Okay, thanks for reminding me about that.
That's
Okay. A and B.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. So items A and B are related under new business. Item A is a public hearing to consider granting an economic development exemption pursuant to Section 13 of Article 11 of the Kansas Constitution. And then B would be actually passing the ordinance to grant that. Both of these, or the public hearing is a statutory requirement. I can tell you we've published notice accurately and also sent direct letters to the county clerk, the Board of County Commissioners, and the Unified School District affected by this project or the consideration of the tax exemption. Real quick, staff, we don't have a presentation for tonight, but I wanted to talk about another statutory requirement, and that's the preparation of a cost-benefit analysis to consider the impact of the tax abatement. There's actually 2 reports in your agenda packet tonight. The first is from Impact Data Source LLC, a firm from Austin, Texas, that was submitted by Hills. And the second report is from Municipal Consulting LLC, a firm from Pittsburgh, Kansas, and that's one that city staff had requested. So overall, both reports show that over the 10-year 100% tax abatement, none of the taxing entities lose any money. I'm going to highlight just 3 of the main differences. Our report tends to be slightly more conservative, and the 3 things I'll highlight are really what impact the difference. So first is their report accounted for some taxable construction sales. Ours didn't. You'll probably recall that this project will be given a project exemption certificate through the Department of Revenue. That's another common tool we do, like on some of our IRB projects. And so there's our projection just considered that there's not going to be any taxable construction sales. And their report just had a minute amount assigned to that. Secondary was their report accounted for indirect job creation and kind of the benefits associated with that. And again, ours doesn't. It's just kind of hard to predict how many indirect jobs and the nature of those. And then finally, the last piece, their report accounted for a small amount of additional single-family home sales. And we just, again, kind of the same reasoning why we didn't project any indirect job creation. We didn't project any new additional home sales. So those are really the three big impactful components that might initiate a change. Again, our report does offer that ratio for every public dollar invested in the project. What's the return on that? We do have some opportunities to increase the city's ratio, but it's right at that impact level that you'd want to see. We'll talk about some of those later tonight on our agenda, like getting some federal grants for the water tower and things of that nature. But I'd be happy to answer any other questions, and I guess I'm remiss, I should have reminded us that we do have representatives of the Hills team here again this evening, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions should you have them as well. So, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Brakovich?
No. George, on the water tower, you're gonna go into detail on the, I know you want to talk about grants and things like that, but the production, the expected usage and the net cost and all that?
Yes, so that's.
I think that's something the public would like to hear.
Yep, so the cost benefit analysis, what it really just factors in is what's the cost, overall cost to the city. But what we're doing is what do we size that at? How does it meet the needs for the Hills project? How does it meet the needs for the remaining business park and beyond the business park in terms of the development that could be expected to occur along the County 1 corridor? One of the grants we'll talk about later this evening is through the Economic Development Administration. They just last week announced some of the ARPA funding they'll have. So typically what you could expect to see that is in a 80-20 split, where 20% local funds would go to grab 80% in grant funds. And we've talked to the Hills team a little bit about kind of letters of support that would need to be submitted with that application. And that'll come together in a pretty short time frame. We think that they'll have their first review of applicants in October, which probably means applications by September. So that gives us about a month or so to put something together.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, at this point, I open the public hearing. Public hearing for consideration of granting an economic development exemption pursuant to Section 13 of Article 11 of the Kansas Constitution and KSA 79-251 for Hills Pet Nutrition Incorporated is now open. The public hearing is. Is there anyone who cares to speak? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone who cares to speak, so at this point, I will close the public hearing and move on to item B. Mr. Brakovich, at this point, we just need a motion. Is this correct?
Yes, unless there's any additional questions, I think it is ready for a motion.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion, please.
Mr. Hempel, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 1499, granting an economic development exemption pursuant to Section 13 of Article 11, the Kansas Constitution, and KSA 79-251 for Hills Pet Nutrition.
Thank you, Mr. Hempel. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Before we take a vote, just want to, one more time, ask if there's anybody who wants to speak. If there's anyone who has questions or any discussion. Okay, still seeing none. Mr. Porter, would you mind calling the roll, please?
Ms. McCutcheon,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Hempel,
Yes.
Mr. Donnelly,
Yes.
Mr. Dale.
Yes.
All ayes, Mayor, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Moving on to item C. Consider approval of engagement letter for consulting services to assist in the preparation of an Economic Development Administration grant application.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is the item I alluded to earlier. Baker Tilly is the firm that we're proposing to engage with here. As a reminder, Baker Tilly is our financial advisor. This is a different arm of the company, though, that specializes in preparing grant applications specifically for federal awards. And so we've done a couple of pre-planning meetings. Again, I talked about a really compressed time frame to go after this. I think to have the best application we could produce, we're recommending to partner up with them. There is an engagement letter. We've introduced a not-to-exceed amount, and there's a provision that if the cost does exceed past that, there's an opportunity to either cut the project or have an additional discussion. But we're feeling pretty confident that not-to-exceed amount is a high enough ceiling we won't touch.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brakowicz. Are there any questions from council?
What is it, George, do you got any idea what the competition for these funds are? Or-
It's a lot, but we feel like we have a pretty good project here. Hills has a great reputation, and in the state of Kansas, it's done well in the past. I think their Emporia plant received one, as well as the city applying for one. Quick recap, I think last week EDA announced that they would have about $3 billion in ARPA funding available. For this specific program, we would have to submit an application under. It's funded at about $500 million. There's a carve out for $200 million that would specifically go to coal communities. So that leaves about $300 million. And, I'm a fan of basic math, so that, that would be 30 basic small number of projects spread across the entire United States. And so the EDA does list 7 or 8 investment priorities, and this project and the proposal to help pay for the water tower meets a number of those, including sustainable development, workforce development, manufacturing, environmentally friendly. So we're feeling pretty confident that we'll have a strong application to submit.
Any further questions? Sorry if I interrupted you, Mr. Donnelly. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion, please.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Hempel.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposed engagement letter for consulting services to assist in the preparation of an economic development administration grant application with Baker Tilly US LLP, not to exceed $15,000.
Thank you, Mr. Hempel. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Mr. Porter, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. McCutcheon,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Hempel,
Yes.
Mr. Donnelly,
Yes.
Mr. Dale.
Yes.
All ayes, Mayor. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. I don't mean to be rude to the Hills personnel that are here, but I'm hoping that maybe you can stick around until later so we could maybe discuss some things. Moving on to item D. Consider approval of agreement for preliminary engineering services and resident project representative and construction engineering services with BG Consultants. Mr.
Thank you, Mayor.
Brakowicz? Oh, it's Mr. Porter.
I'll start
Sorry.
with this item. This contract is related to the first phase of the city's costs entailed in the water tower construction project. The amount is twofold. The first $65,000 is a lump sum fee for engineering preparation services, and those are contracted through this agreement with the city's engineer. Brian Kingsley of BG Consultants has submitted the proposal. That $65,000 will help cover the cost of topographic survey, project design, the project manual preparation, and assistance through the city's bid letting process when we acquire a contractor to actually complete the construction activities. The additional $70,000 included in the total request of $135,000 is for acting as the city's resident project representative throughout the construction activities. So they'd be the person that a contractor goes to with questions about a specification or detailed questions about processes that might include things like change orders or the construction observation that we as the city would require just like of any other infrastructure project to be completed. Since it's going to be completed by a third-party contractor and not city crews or city employees, those observation requirements would still be in place. The hourly rates that the city engineer provides under his staff are included in this agreement, but again, that not to exceed amount for the second construction phase of the services is $70,000 maximum for the project duration. This project is going to be largely funded by reserves in the Water Capital Fund and in the Water Operations Fund. We may end up needing to look at budget amendments for the capital fund to allow those expenditures depending on the timing. We can factor some of this into 2022's budget, but we anticipate that a large majority of the construction design work will get done later this year with an approval decision if it's made tonight by the city council. So some of the cost will be paid in 2021 and some will likely fall into 2022 and maybe even early 2023. That's generally the timing that we anticipate for the project cost for engineering. One last thing I'd like to point out is the deadline date of July 31st, 2023. That's in keeping with the city's development agreement with Hills to have this infrastructure in place and operational. So the consulting contract with BG Consultants does meet that timeframe obligation as part of the contract language. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Porter?
Now, it was my understanding with BG doing the engineering and that has to be performed also in order to apply for the Economic Development Administrative Grant. Is that correct?
That is correct. We do anticipate the city's contribution, should we receive that grant, will be this funding. We will be reimbursed for 80% of the construction cost, but that will largely entail the monies we pay to a contractor for actually fabricating and assembling the water tower. So the city's match or 20% share of the project will come from this and some share of the construction cost if we do acquire that grant.
Thanks, Mr. Porter. Anyone else have any questions? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed agreement for preliminary engineering services and resident project representative and construction engineering services for the water storage tank project with BG Consultants, Inc. for an amount not to exceed $135,000.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. McCutcheon. Mr. Porter, will you call the roll for the vote, please?
Ms. McCutcheon,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Hempel.
Yes.
Mr. Donnelly.
Yes.
Mr. Dale.
Yes.
All ayes, Mayor. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Item E is Resolution 08-2101. Mr. Porter?
Thank you, Mayor. This item is related to the water tower project, and in a nutshell, what it allows the city council to do is at the conclusion of the or at the point in time where the city makes a decision to cash finance and debt finance some portion of the overall cost, whether that be supported by the grant or not, for the water tower project. Adopting this resolution at this point in time allows us to look back 60 days before tonight and encompass any cost we incurred for the water tower project in what we debt finance. So it gives the city maximum flexibility to issue TIP notes or long-term debt financing for costs like preliminary engineering that wasn't part of the contract that was just approved a moment ago, or the entirety of the engineering cost that was just approved. This is something we try to get done early in a project lifespan, so we do have maximum flexibility as the city to debt finance all or a large portion of a project cost. The resolution was prepared by staff from Gilmore and Bell, the city's bond counsel, and we do have their support in moving forward adopting the resolution as shown. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions, council? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I will make a motion to approve Resolution 08-2101, authorizing expenses associated with construction of water elevated storage tank.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Porter, will you call the roll for the vote, please?
Ms. McCutcheon,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Hempel,
Yes.
Mr. Donnelly,
Yes.
Mr. Dale.
Yes.
All ayes, Mayor. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Item F, review draft city website design and implementation request for proposals.
Yep, thanks, Mayor. So this is an item is partially for your information and partially to get a simple motion to move forward with it. This is something we budgeted this time last year as we developed the budget for this year. And we prepared the RFP. It's fairly involved, but we need a lot of work on our website and focus on content management. And so we are looking to put this out on the street. As a follow-up, though, we'd like to form a committee to review the proposals when they come in, and we'd like to include a couple of members of the city council on that review committee. So if anybody wants to volunteer to do that tonight, that'd be great. Otherwise, we'll take the motion just to get it out there.
Any questions for Mr. Brakovich? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I would make a motion that we approve staff's request to let implementation request for proposal for website design. Is that going to get us close enough?
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously on a voice vote. Item G, consider approval of temporary CMB license for the Shrine Demolition Derby. Mr. Porter?
Thank you, Mayor. This item is an item that the city council may recall. We did not receive a request because the event didn't occur in 2020, but in several years prior to 2020, the Shriners Group did hold a demolition derby at the Leavenworth County Fairgrounds. And as the property is in city limits and the organizers of the event wish to sell alcohol, they are required by the state to work through the city's approval for a temporary CMB license. The fee for that license is $150. The city staff help collect the application, submit it to the city council for your consideration, and then we, should you approve it, work with the state to process the application. This year, we're a little later than usual in considering this. Normally, we've done this approval by May, but this year it was submitted for the event later this month, and the fee has been paid in full. We also referred to the city's police department and police chief in particular to ensure that there were no concerns with the licensed premises diagram or the conduct of purveyors of alcohol or the consumers of it at previous events, and Chief Lawson did not have any reservations to offer. So staff would recommend the approval of this temporary CMB license, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions, council?
Do they crash them little small cars they drive around the street? Is that what they run into?
That would be a dangerous, I don't think that would get our approval for a lot of reasons.
While they're drinking.
Is that a direction to staff, Mr. Donnelly?
We are not entering a city car, so don't worry. We might have a police vehicle or two.
Any questions for Mr. Porter?
I want to go down on record on this one, so I make a motion to approve the temporary CMB application for the Abdullah Shrine Demolition Derby for consumption on the Leavenworth County Fairgrounds premises.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously on a voice vote. Moving on to our city manager agenda. Mr. Brakovich?
Nothing additional, Mayor.
Okay.
I do have a question for the city manager maybe it's my agenda, but since we're up. You had talked about Brandon doing inspections or assisting with inspections on the Hill project.
Yes.
Do we have the expertise to do that correctly?
Yes, we're reviewing that as they're submitted, and anything that would require a special inspection based on either the material or the manufacturer's recommendation, we're ready to do that as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Ms. Kirstelich,
Anything on the city attorney agenda?
I do not.
Thank you. Item J, is there anything on the mayor pro tem agenda?
I do not, Mayor.
City council, do you have anything?
I would volunteer for the website design RFP reviews.
And I would suggest that Jenny help with that also.
I was going to volunteer, so that's fine.
Okay. We have a few more things to tighten up with the Hills thing, or no, just, we have a final plat, correct?
Yes, so remaining, so this week, the final plat and the final development plan will go to the planning commission. And if those items get approved at planning commission on August 16th, the next city council meeting, you'll have an opportunity to review the final plat for any of the public easements that need to be recorded with that plat. And at that point, that would, barring any changes to anything, we would be complete with the public hearing process, public meeting process.
Okay. Just to the Hills folks, I just want to say thank you. You've been great help during this entire project. A great source of information whenever we had a question. And I don't know how many folks know the parable of the mustard seed, but I think you're our mustard seed that's going to help us turn into something else that's for the better. And I'm looking forward to this project, and welcome to Tonganoxie.
I'd like to add on to that, being involved in economic development in Tonganoxie since 1994, and being the one that wrote the letter to get the land purchased from where you will be located. I want to thank you for coming. I think in all the years of economic development, I've heard lots of complaints about projects, but this one I've heard very, very few. And matter of fact, I get calls quite often about support for the project. And I just wanted to share that with you, that there's always things that just don't work for people, and I understand that. But in this case, high majority, we're very pleased, and we really hope that it's a great partnership in the long run. Thank you.
Okay. I think that's it for the night. I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.